In this episode of Motive Garage presented by Sparesbox, we're going to find out why our new R35 GT-R blew an engine. So if you watched the first episode of our new R35 GT-R project car, you'll know that I got it sorted, loved it, but then the engine blew up. I got to admit, I was pretty upset. I've heard and seen hundreds of different reasons online of why people think what happened. I've heard everything from clearly the car used to be modified, it was unmodified, and the guy sold it because it was a lemon. The guy sold it because he knew it was going to break. I've heard all sorts of crazy theories, but I can tell you this. One of the top GT-R tuning shops for R35s in the world and the top Skyline GT-R tuning shop in the world, combined with myself and other people who know R35 GT-Rs who I spoke with, all basically said that car is in really good condition and shows absolutely zero signs of having an issue. The car checked out really well. So why did it put a hole on the block and grenade an engine?
Anything you touch, you
Well, that's what we're going to find out today in this episode. First thing we need to do is go over to CID, pull the engine out, and that way we can obviously start the tail down process. I've got some other things I want to look at. So let's get to the bottom of this puzzle in true Motive Garage style and find out exactly what happened rather than asking the internet on their keyboard. Let's go. While I'm waiting for Croydon to tear the engine down, I want to take a look at the fuel pumps and the fuel filters and see if there's any fuel delivery issues. Why do I want to do that? Well, a couple of times when I drove the car, I gave it a hit and second and third felt fine, and then fourth gear fell over a little bit. Is that a fuel delivery issue? I don't know, but talking to Con, he did say that the ECU in this car, in theory, should detect a lean condition and go into limp mode or pull power, etc. It'll detect any detonation. It'll also detect any knock from obviously having a lean cylinder, pull timing out, and protect the engine. But the fact that I had no warning lights, no limp mode, no nothing, makes us think that fuel may not be the issue as well. But better to be safe than sorry, and I'm going to pull the fuel pumps out of this car. Now, pulling the fuel pumps out is pretty straightforward. You just take the seat cushion off, you undo the bolts, undo the plugs, and basically pull the fuel assembly out. Now, in the R35 GT-R, there's a plastic assembly that has two pumps, it has two filter socks, a post-pump filter, and then you obviously have the plastic tubing up to the hat, and then you also have all the stuff for the crossover into the other side of the saddle fuel tank. I don't like that corrugated plastic stuff. It tends to get brittle and break with age, so we'll check very shortly if there's any issues with that. But the first thing I did notice when we pulled the fuel system out and put it on the bench, stripped open the plastic tank, is that one of the filters is incredibly dirty. Now you might look at that and think, oh yeah, that's the problem. But a lot of these filters can look filthy dirty like that and still flow totally fine. So what we're going to do now is behind me, you can see I've set up a fuel flow, test area. I've got a container full of petrol. I've submerged the pumps into it. I can put power to each pump. We're going to measure how much goes into a container and check the fuel flow in 60 seconds and then work it out in litres per hour. Compare that to what a factory pump or similar pump would do to know if there's a fuel delivery issue. Let's go. So the setup's pretty simple. I've got a 12-volt battery to put power to each pump individually, and I simply just run the fuel hose into a container. I'm going to run it for 60 seconds, and then obviously I can times that by 60 for minutes and then work out the litre per hour with flow. Now, one thing I have noticed with this is exactly like I said before, these plastic tubes go brittle. There is a pinhole leak in the fuel delivery tube. Now, it looks pretty crazy with how much fuel's spurting out, but honestly, it actually won't affect flow all that much, maybe 5%, 10% at the very most. So I'm going to do the check of fuel flow with that pinhole still here, because that'll simulate what was in the car. Was that pinhole in there beforehand, or did that happen during removal? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to test it how it is. So after exactly 60 seconds of the fuel pump being on, we can measure 1, 2, 3 litres of fuel now in the container. You times that by 60, it's 180 litres per hour. Now we've got to repeat that with the second pump, and then we can get a better idea of overall fuel flow. Let's go. So one thing we also do during this test is we actually put our finger over the end of the fuel hose so we can create some restriction, which will create pressure in the fuel line. We don't want to do it with no pressure. We want to do it at least with some pressure to put some load on the pump to get a more accurate reading of what the fuel pump's doing. So the secondary pump, which had a clean filter, actually flowed exactly the same. It flowed 3 litres in 60 seconds, which equates to 180 litres per hour. So we have 2 pumps flowing 180 litres per hour. So what have we learnt from this? The fuel pumps seem to be in pretty good condition. The pinhole hasn't really affected the outright fuel flow all that much. I'm sure with more pressure and more load, but also remember we're doing this at 12 volts, not 14 volts. So this test was really just more of an indication to see, are they within a range that would be considered lean and dangerous, or are they well within a range that's considered happy? And with 2 times 180 litres per minute, that should be no problem providing fuel for a standard R35 GT-R. So although I'd like to replace the fuel pumps in this to suit bigger power later, and obviously want to fix that pinhole leak, in terms of fault finding why our GT-R had an issue, I can pretty much safely say that it is not due to fuel flow. Even though the filters look dirty and there's a pinhole in there, that is not what caused the issue with our VR38. So let's head back to CRD and see what they find when they pull the engine down.
Okay, so we've got Hawkins R35 engine here. We've just basically taken the manifolds off, turbochargers and so on. Quick visual inspection of the intake. This cylinder here is completely full of oil with the valves closed. That's not a good sign. Cylinder number 6, same thing. A lot of oil, a little bit of water in there. Not a good sign at all. That one there looks destroyed. We've got a broken valve. I can see the top of the piston, which is never a good sign. That doesn't look too good at all. So I'm going to say that con rod's broken, come up, destroyed the head. And a valve at least, minimum. We'll have to see how bad the damage is. Okay, having just pulled this VCT cover off, this appears to be pretty dry and free of oil, which concerns me a little bit. I would have expected a little bit more oil inside that cover, and also inside of here it's quite dry, which is not a good sign. We could have done an oil pump, so we'll find out soon. That's not a good sign at all. Okay, again, that's fairly dry. It's a bit of a concern so far, so we'll see how we go. It's fairly dry in there as well. A little bit of metal alloy in there, which is expected from this particular blow up. So we'll keep going, but it possibly could be an oil pump. We don't know yet. We'll find out. Just one other thing, when you pull these VCT covers off, what can happen, this small hole here is actually the oil feed. They run a small filter inside the block itself. They can get blocked. It's worth checking if you ever have this front cover off, or if you have a problem with the VCT. Definitely worth checking. So these just slide in, and they are obviously replaceable. It's steel mesh, you can clean them up, but they're worth checking if you do have a VCT issue with these things. Okay, so we just pulled the timing cover off this engine, and based on what I can see here, I don't think we're supposed to have coolant mixed in with the oil system. There's definitely some coolant all over this timing cover, as well as a large amount of metal and alloy debris, so that's not a good sign. I'm going to say there's definitely a hole in the block somewhere. If we've got coolant mixed in here with the sump, definitely not a good sign at all. Okay, so we've just removed the timing chain off this VR, and this is a fairly common chain that's used in automotive lately. It's referred to as a Morse chain. Typically it's used more because of the reduction in noise. It's also fairly strong. It's also used in a much larger format in the transfer cases in an R32 transfer case, or 34 as well, 33. Just much larger in those particular setups. So these are fairly strong chains. They're fairly quiet, they're longevities, years. So they're pretty common in most automotive setups these days if they're running a timing chain. And they're pretty fault-free most of the time. Oh, hang on. Hey Hawkins, I found your problem. Too much boost. Whoa.
Okie dokie.
Well, that's a con rod. That's the other end of the con rod. That's the small end. That's a gudgeon pin. That shouldn't be there. More piston. What is that? I think that's a piece of the block. Oh, we've got a piston ring. Yeah, whatever that is. Yeah. Oh, there's the valve.
Is that a wrist pin?
It's a bit hurry.
There's our valve. That's where it's meant to be in the sump. Wow. Wow.
Done a good job, that one.
Wow. There must be no piston left in that cylinder. There must be no piston left. That's impressive.
We're just getting the first reaction so you can have a look at what Hawkins did.
I'll put it down first.
Yeah, you can do. I'd recommend you put that down first, yeah. We just dropped the sump off.
Oh wow. Fuck, you done a good job.
That's not the best part.
Oh my God,
Here's the best part, look. That was in the sump.
Fucking hell.
Gudgeon pin. I've just taken some of the parts and just given them a quick wash, ready for reassembly.
There's a piston missing there.
I think there is a piston. It's a 5-cylinder.
way.
Wow.
Not bad.
There's no way that spark plug's coming out. Wow. That's a good job.
Not way that valve's coming out.
Wow.
When the electrode is missing, there's too much timing.
Fucking battered. JB Weld will fix it.
Wow. Surprised all the other valves didn't break. That's why I think that valve let go. But you reckon the piston let go?
Okay, so we've removed number 2 conrod, as you can see, or what's left of it anyway. At this point, just looking at the bearing shells, I'm going to say, and the fact that the crank's actually pretty good, I'm going to say the oil system wasn't the failure in this particular scenario, or what caused the failure. We do have some unusual wear on the bearing here on the edges, but that would have happened when the conrod, failed. So at this point, I'm going to say that the oil system was good. The crank actually looks really good considering what happened to it. There's no debris that's gone through the bearing, so I don't think there's, the oil system's picked up some random stuff, or this is actually locked up in the crank. So that's a good sign in terms of saving the crankshaft. Definitely we've blown a conrod. But at this point, it's not the oil system, it's the culprit. I'm going to say possibly still looking towards the piston grabbing the bore or something weird like that. So we'll continue to strip this down and we'll see what we find. Okay, so we've finished disassembling this VR38 after it's basically a grenade option. After checking all the pistons, crank, block, bore, so on, it looks to be possibly a snapped conrod. The pistons are showing no signs of lean mixtures or anything unusual. There's nothing sort of seriously broken or damaged with the rings. The bearings themselves, the mains and the big ends are all showing good signs of normal wear, nothing unusual, nothing's gone through the oil system, nothing's sort of grabbed, worn out and so on. So it's not like the big end on the conrod has grabbed and destroyed the engine that way. It looks to be just a conrod failure, which is sort of common on these, considering that they do make decent power and they are a fairly long rod considering. And they are a stock rod. So apart from that, the tune itself looks like, based on the condition of the bores and so on, pistons looks to be good. Doesn't look like it's had a failed fuel pump or anything like that. So at this point, we're leaning towards a broken conrod. So, and unfortunately, it's grenaded that engine and aerated the block and turned it into a 3.2. instead of a 3.8. Moving forward from here, it'll be up to Hawkins, I guess, what we do next. The only thing we could salvage out of the whole engine so far has been the crankshaft. Cylinder heads are completely destroyed, blocks destroyed, girdles destroyed, all that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, when you build an engine like this in a VR, one of the main things you would change if you want to go big power is the crankshaft. So it's probably a full engine. Maybe a billet block, maybe. Is it really wanting to push it? If not, it's going to be a big build either way. Look forward to it.
So once the guys from CID disassembled the engine, I went over there for a look myself, and I agree with them. There is basically no evidence inside the actual block itself of why the engine failed. There is 0 detonation marks on any of the cylinders that are intact. There is no heat markings on any of the con rods, which you normally get in like a detonation or a big lean out, or if you spin a bearing or have an oil supply issue, you'll see heat marks either on bearings, you'll see heat marks on con rods before they break, but our engine had no heat marks on any con rods. The bearings were completely intact. Even cylinder 2, which was destroyed, you could still spin the crank and the bearings were okay, both main and big end. So having completely intact bearings means there's no oil supply issue that caused it. By not having any heat marks, that's another sign of that. And we didn't find any detonation marks on any of the other cylinders. Obviously on cylinder 2, it's very hard to diagnose because once the rod let go, debris went everywhere. So what happened? Well, if we can't find any evidence of any type of lean out across the board from the fuel pumps, and we can't find any lean out on the other 5, the last thing left to check is, did an injector fail on cylinder 2? So we sent all 6 injectors away to be cleaned and flow tested. Now basically the information that came back to us was that they flowed identical, which means there was no discrepancy between any injectors whatsoever. So really from there, what's left to look at? Well, nothing really. I mean, there was no wiring issues or anything like that. The car had no codes or lights. There's no data to show why it broke. It just broke. Can a mechanical part in a car like that just randomly break? Yeah, it can. And from what I'm told from other workshops, this is not the first time that an R35 GT-R has just broken a rod because it one day woke up and felt like it. I've heard back from multiple workshops, they've had older model R35s do exactly the same thing. Person can just be driving along, con rod just breaks, which is pretty frustrating, right? Because that means that if you modify an early model R35, you are really rolling the dice. Our next engine we'll start off with a stock engine, but I'll probably throw rods and pistons into it, and then obviously fresh bearings, fresh head gasket, fresh studs. So we start with a completely refreshed stock engine with 0 kilometers on it. When are we going to do that? Well, to be honest, I don't know. I'm heading to the United States, well, in about 3 hours from this moment of filming this right now. So I'm doing preparation for GT-R Festival USA all the way up, obviously, until the event. I'm not going to be really back in Australia until sort of late November. So hopefully sometime between now and then, the right opportunity arises for me to secure a second-hand engine that either suits rebuild or is just nice and cheap. Because if you saw the price people are asking for a complete VR38 here in Australia at the moment, you'd fall off your chair and choke on your breakfast and wish you'd never bought a GT-R. They are so expensive.
Telling me, dreaming.
But hopefully I can just find one, and like I said, I'll freshen it up, and we still want to do development from stock turbos, stock everything, all the way through to where we end up. But we are going to start with a fresh engine so I don't have to worry about this again. And the other thing I'll probably do is put a fresh fuel pump, fresh fuel lines and everything in the car straight away, so we just don't have any issues with our development cycles. But we'll go through more of that when we do finally do the next issue on our R35 GT-R. So stay tuned for that, but in the meantime, make sure you head to gtrfestival.com, get all the information on PRP GT-R Festival USA, because we'll be there and it's going to be a massive party, and hopefully, well, if all goes to plan after that, there'll be plenty of GT-Rs to build at the end of the year and the start of the new year here at Motive Garage. See you soon.
The Platinum Racing Products GT-R Festival, presented by Pennzoil, HKS USA, Cars from Japan and Motive Video, is heading to the USA on November 15th through 17th at Texas Motorplex. Full info, entries and tickets available at gtrfestival.com.